Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we are taking the stack of notes and audio clips you sent over, specifically this really fascinating discussion from the English Boost podcast, and parsing out the underlying mechanics of it all.
Yeah, and it's a great topic, the vocabulary of wisdom.
It really is. And I have to say, going through your sources this morning, it actually made me look at my own daily routine entirely differently.
Oh, really? In what way?
Well, have you ever noticed that a cup of tea always tastes like significantly better when someone else makes it for you?
Oh my gosh, yes, always.
Right. I mean, it is the exact same water, the exact same leaves, maybe even the exact same mug you always use, but somehow it just lands completely differently.
There is actually a brilliant psychological mechanism behind that.
Wait, really? It's an actual thing.
Oh, absolutely. When you make your own tea, that cup comes with an inherent layer of responsibility.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, I mean, you had to boil the water, you had to watch the clock to steep it perfectly, you had to interrupt whatever workflow you were in to go all the way to the kitchen.
Right, it's a whole chore.
Exactly. But when someone else walks into the room and just hands it to you, that tea comes exclusively with comfort. It feels like an act of healing instead of, just another task on your to-do list.
That makes so much sense. It's the gap between bearing the weight of a process yourself and being sheltered by someone else.
Precisely.
And that profound little observation is really the perfect launch pad for our mission today. We are exploring a phenomenon that, honestly, every single human being eventually confronts.
Which is how the seemingly cliche advice our elders used to give us, the phrases that made you roll your eyes so hard you saw your own brain as a teenager.
Oh yeah, the ultimate teenage eye roll.
Right. How those phrases suddenly transform into undeniable, profound truth as we get older.
It is entirely universal. And if we take that idea of comfort versus responsibility from the tea analogy, it maps perfectly onto the arc of growing up.
It really does, because when we are young, we desperately want the comfort of easy answers, but we want to bypass the responsibility of lived experience.
We just want the tea handed to us.
Exactly. So today's deep dive is not just about cataloging old proverbs. We are looking closely at the specific English vocabulary we use to describe the passage of time.
The painful acquisition of wisdom.
Yeah, and that inevitable shift from being sheltered to taking responsibility for our own understanding of the world.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the transition from youth to adulthood is essentially a massive, forced change in perspective.
A total paradigm shift.
Right. The English Boost podcast sources you provided bring up this classic proverb, "A smooth sea never made a skilled sailor."
Oh, that's a classic.
Now, if you deliver that line to an 18-year-old, their immediate internal reaction is going to be, I am not even on a boat. Why are we talking like an 18th century pirate?
Right, like what are you even talking about, old man?
Exactly. It sounds impossibly dramatic and just entirely disconnected from their daily reality.
Well, what's fascinating here is that the disconnect happens because youth, by its very definition, lacks the context of sustained pain.
Or profound disappointment.
Yeah. I mean, when you are 20, you just haven't lived through enough literal or metaphorical storms.
A bad day is usually a localized event,
Uh-huh.
right? Like a failed exam or a disagreement with a friend.
Exactly. It isn't systemic failure. It isn't deep, life-altering grief.
Right.
So when an elder offers you a survival guide for navigating rough seas, it feels entirely abstract. It's just a grand metaphor taking up space in the room.
It's just words.
Exactly. It requires life to provide the necessary friction before that advice stops being a metaphor and becomes a literal, functional tool.
It's almost like our elders were buying us clothes a few sizes too big.
Oh, I like that.
Think about being a kid, right? Swimming in this massive winter coat, complaining that the sleeves are way too long, that it looks ridiculous, that you absolutely hate wearing it.
I remember that feeling so vividly.
Right. But the adults knew something you didn't, which is that you were going to grow. And that is a phrase the sources highlight heavily today, to grow into something.
Grow into, it's such a great phrasal verb.
It is such a physical way to describe learning. You don't just cognitively understand wisdom in an instant, you grow into it.
You really don't. And the spatial metaphor of that phrase is crucial here. At 20, wise words just sit near you. They are external objects.
Like the coat on the hanger.
Exactly. They are in your ear, maybe written in a graduation card, but they remain on the outside. But by the time you are 40 or 50, those same words sit inside you.
Wow.
You have physically and emotionally expanded to fit the weight of the experience, finally filling out the empty space of the oversized coat.
But, realizing that the smooth sea is an illusion leaves us incredibly vulnerable. because nobody actively wants the rough seas.
Of course not. We naturally look for shortcuts.
And if we are desperately trying to avoid the hard lessons, it seems like we become incredibly susceptible to people or situations that promise us a fake version of safety.
Oh, totally. That is the ultimate danger of avoiding friction. We fall for illusions. We chase the appearance of stability over actual character.
Which naturally leads us into the traps we inevitably fall into before the wisdom fully sets in.
Right. And your sources highlight the proverb, actions speak louder than words, through a very telling story about workplace dynamics.
Well, the coworker story, yes.
Yeah, that one really got me.
This is about a guy who possessed the absolute perfect, calming, professional vocabulary. He would always say all the right things in meetings.
Stuff like, don't worry, I'm with you on this.
Or, we're going to handle this as a team. And because human beings are, biologically hardwired to gravitate toward warm, confident sounds, the entire office trusted him implicitly.
He projected total dependability. But then, this major project starts to slowly deteriorate.
Right, and it's not a sudden fiery explosion that everyone can rally around.
No, it's the quiet, stressful kind of deterioration. Deadlines are quietly missed. The tension in the Slack channels rises.
Off the worst.
The psychological temperature of the office gets colder and more isolating every single day. And in the middle of this creeping dread, his words remain perfectly lovely.
Right. He continues to make promises, but his physical actions just completely evaporate.
Yep. When it requires staying until 9 p.m. to fix a spreadsheet or, taking the blame on a messy client call,
he is completely absent.
Exactly.
And when you live through that specific flavor of betrayal, actions speak louder than words ceases to be this dusty cliche your dad repeated at the dinner table. It hits home.
Hits home, yes.
And I love how English uses that phrase. When something hits home, it lands viscerally in your chest. It bypasses the intellectual brain entirely.
It really does. But even when it hits home, the sources point out that our first instinct isn't to just accept the lesson.
Oh, no, definitely not.
Our first instinct is usually to rationalize it. We retreat into being stubborn.
Stubborn, yeah.
But notice how this operates in practice. Being stubborn here isn't about stomping your feet like a toddler. It is a quiet, internal rationalization.
Like making excuses for them.
Exactly. You sit at your desk, doing the absent coworker's job for them, and you run a script in your head. Like, he is just overwhelmed right now. He means well.
Or, I am probably just being too demanding.
Right. We actively defend their bad behavior in our own minds because acknowledging the reality that you are alone and the words were totally empty means you have to confront them.
Which is deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting, though, because I want to challenge this a bit.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
So your sources also bring up the proverb, all that glitters is not gold, to describe chasing shiny illusions.
Right.
But if you look at the modern digital economy, we are living in a world built entirely on glitter.
That's a very good point.
I mean, your polished social media presence, the heavily curated LinkedIn updates, the humble bragging that polish is literally how you network, how you get hired, and basically how you survive.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
So isn't this old proverb essentially asking us to sabotage our own modern careers by rejecting the polish?
Well, it is a fair pushback, but the proverb isn't telling you to ignore the existence of the polish. It is warning you not to confuse the polish with the substance.
Ah, I see.
The glitter may get you in the door, but it cannot sustain you once you are inside. And the English Boost podcast actually illustrates this with the story of the shiny job offer.
Oh, right.
This opportunity had maximum glitter, an impressive director title, a beautiful corner office, and a company name that makes people instantly respect you at dinner parties.
It looked incredible from the sidewalk.
Exactly. But the lived reality of the job was a complete mismatch. The atmospheric coldness of the corporate culture was staggering.
The executives smiled in the hallways, but it was completely devoid of warmth or any actual support.
And the storyteller described coming home every single evening feeling physically smaller.
Just totally drained.
Totally drained by the invisible tension between the shiny public surface and the deeply toxic daily reality.
And enduring that kind of mismatch is profoundly humbling.
Humbling, yes.
Let's look at the mechanics of that word. It shares a root with humus, meaning earth or ground.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it is an experiential lowering. It isn't just about feeling momentary embarrassment. It is life, physically bringing your pride down to earth.
Forcing you to recognize that appearance and reality operate in completely different domains.
Exactly. You realize you spent years chasing what looked impressive to other people rather than what felt sustainable and healthy to you.
So the humbling process essentially strips us down, it removes the glitter, it exposes the empty words, and it leaves us standing there a bit bruised.
Yeah, quite a bit bruised.
But the deep dive into these materials shows that our elders didn't just leave us warnings about the illusions, they also left us a toolkit for how to rebuild and protect ourselves moving forward.
So what does this all mean? Let's look at the practical maintenance of life.
The preventative care of existence, really. There is a proverb that serves as a cornerstone for this. A stitch in time saves nine.
Which, on its face, just sounds like a literal sewing tutorial from the 19th century.
Right, like something you'd read in a colonial handbook.
But the audio clips from the podcast point out that mothers, in particular, use this phrase as a full operating system for reality.
It really is.
It applies to managing finances, navigating family tensions, even doing laundry. There's a specific story in the notes about a delayed medical issue that perfectly captures the psychology of this.
Oh, that story is so relatable. It always begins with a minor discomfort.
Yep.
The exact kind of physical warning sign that modern life trains us to completely ignore. A doctor might say, take this antibiotic, rest for 3 days, and handle it right now.
But human nature, combined with a demanding schedule, kicks in.
Oh, yeah. We tell ourselves, I will deal with my biology next week. Let me just get through this massive quarterly review at work first.
It is the ultimate delusion of control.
Yeah.
Because what actually happens while you are focusing on the quarterly review?
Things get worse.
Exactly.
Okay.
That small, easily fixable issue quietly grows teeth. It festers in the background until it becomes highly complex, agonizingly painful, and requires a massive disruptive intervention.
Which proves that a stitch in time saves nine is not a cute domestic suggestion.
No, it's an absolute law of physics regarding entropy.
And once you survive that kind of entirely preventable escalation, the proverb transforms into something deeply reassuring.
Reassuring. I like that word choice.
It shifts from feeling like a parental nag to feeling like a safety net. You realize that early care, whether it is having a difficult 10-minute conversation with your partner today to avoid a screaming match next month, or just taking a day off to rest.
It is essentially a profound act of kindness to your future self.
Exactly.
But if we have these practical maintenance tools for our internal lives, how does the vocabulary shift when we look at how we treat the rest of the world?
Well, that brings up the concept of what goes around comes around.
Now I want to know your take on this. Is this proverb suggesting there is a magical cosmic karma keeping score? Or is it pointing to something far more practical about human memory?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is deeply rooted in practical human memory and the basic laws of cause and effect. It is not a magical punishment or reward system. The audio discussion frames this beautifully. The ecosystem of life remembers.
Because human beings carry the emotional residue of how they are treated.
Precisely. Care inevitably returns, and disrespect inevitably leaves a permanent stain on a relationship.
The story they used to ground this idea was incredibly moving. It involved the vulnerability of moving into a new apartment.
Oh, the grocery store story.
Yes. You know that highly unsettled phase where nothing is unpacked, your routines are shattered, and you are operating on a severe sleep deficit.
The worst feeling.
The storyteller walked to the local corner shop late at night, exhausted carrying bags, only to realize at the register that they had left their wallet at the office across town.
Oh, no.
They were standing there completely exposed, holding groceries they could not pay for.
And the shopkeeper, who barely has a relationship with this person, assesses the situation, weighs a hand, and says, "Take it. Bring the money tomorrow."
Such a simple thing.
It is a microscopic moment in the grand scheme of things, but it establishes a permanent baseline of trust. And the ecosystem pays it back months later.
Right, because the storyteller is walking down the street and sees that exact same shopkeeper struggling on the sidewalk with an impossibly awkward, heavy delivery box.
The kind of box that is so massive it suddenly becomes the business of everyone walking past.
Exactly. So the storyteller drops their own bags, steps in, and helps them carry it into the back room. It costs them maybe 2 minutes of their day.
But as they're brushing off their hands, the shopkeeper looks up and says, "See, it comes back."
It comes back. Experiencing that kind of cyclical grace gives a person a profound sense of perspective.
Perspective.
Think about how we use that word in art. It is the technique of representing three-dimensional objects on a two-dimensional surface to show depth.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
Right. In life, gaining perspective is literally stepping backward to see a wider angle. You stop viewing kindness as a vending machine transaction. Like, I put a favor in, I get a favor out.
Right, it's not transactional.
You begin to see it as a softness that transfers from person to person. You ease the burden for the shopkeeper, and he carries a slightly lighter, softer energy to the next 10 customers he interacts with.
It's beautiful. We can put a stitch in time to fix things early, and we can introduce that softness into the system to build a community safety net. But your sources emphasize that there is one element of our elders' advice we absolutely cannot fix early and we cannot negotiate with.
Yeah, and that is the relentless, indifferent passage of time.
The ultimate unfixable variable. The proverbs concerning time are almost universally the ones that carry the deepest ache, like time and tide wait for no man.
When you're a teenager, that just sounds like an authority figure demanding productivity.
Got to work.
Yeah, it sounds like someone telling you to get off the couch and stop wasting your Saturday.
But the reality beneath those words is so much quieter and sadder. The notes from the English Boost podcast detail this poignant memory of a grandfather.
This part was tough to listen to.
It really was. He was not a man who delivered sweeping cinematic speeches about seizing the day. He communicated in these small, passing observations.
Like standing by the door.
Right. He would stand by the door as people were leaving and say, "Come by when you can. Time moves quickly."
And to a young person who is rushing frantically toward their future, completely convinced that their real life is a destination somewhere ahead of them, a sentence like that is just background noise.
We operate under the stubborn delusion that the current version of reality is permanent. We assume there will always be another ordinary Tuesday afternoon to drop by and have coffee.
Until the inevitable day arrives when you look around and the set dressing of your life has been completely struck.
Yeah.
The house has been sold or changed, the people are gone or fundamentally different. You realize that time was moving the entire time you were busy color-coding your calendar and rescheduling visits.
And suddenly, a sentence that sounded like passing chatter feels enormous, and it leaves you completely nostalgic. Notice how the sources explore the sensory nature of being nostalgic. It goes far beyond simply recalling a fact. The word itself comes from Greek roots, meaning a return home and pain.
Wow. Return home and pain.
Yes, it is the pain of wanting to return to a place you cannot reach. You don't just remember the grandfather's words. When you look back on it, your brain recreates the slow, rhythmic ticking of the ceiling fan.
The specific hollow sound of the plates clinking in the kitchen.
The exact angle of the late afternoon light hitting the living room rug.
You realize that nobody sitting in that room understood they were actively living inside a memory that would one day be devastatingly precious.
Yeah.
Time and tide truly do not wait.
Yeah.
The people we love grow older while we are postponing the conversations we think we have endless time for.
But, there is a vital counterbalance to the ache of time passing.
Okay, good, because that was getting heavy.
I know. But the counterbalance is the enduring nature of human resilience. If we contrast that sadness with the proverb, where there is a will, there is a way, the sources share a reflection on a grandmother that beautifully illustrates quiet endurance.
I found this entirely reframed the concept of resilience for me.
Really? How so?
Because modern culture usually frames where there is a will, there is a way as this aggressive, hyper-masculine motivational poster.
Oh, like rise and grind.
Exactly. It is all about conquering mountains, crushing your goals, and dominating the competition.
Right, but the grandmother's lived reality was the polar opposite of that loud performance. Her life was defined by a distinct lack of comfort.
There was never quite enough money.
Never quite enough heat in the house, never enough hours to rest. Yet she continually found a way to stretch a meager set of ingredients into a meal that fed an entire crowded table.
A way to keep a drafty home feeling secure.
She carried an immense daily physiological and emotional burden without ever once requiring an audience for her strength.
The sources called it a kitchen kind of hope.
Kitchen kind of hope.
That phrase is so evocative.
Yeah.
Because the most enduring load-bearing strength in the human experience doesn't ask for applause.
It doesn't need to be documented on a viral video.
Exactly. It is just they quietly left linguistic signs behind. The brilliance of a proverb is its structural simplicity.
Right. It is simple enough for a teenager to memorize and roll their eyes at.
But structurally deep enough to unfold and provide genuine shelter 3 decades later.
They are essentially time capsules. We have seen today through the notes and audio you provided, that these proverbs sit quietly in the back of our minds.
They play like low background music for years, completely unnoticed.
And they wait. They wait patiently until the moment your life provides the exact shape and the exact heartbreak required to unlock their true utility.
We truly do have to grow into the empty space of the words.
We really do.
Which brings us entirely back to your own deep dive. Looking at the materials you sent us from the English Boost podcast, it begs the question for your own life. Which of these little tools left behind by an elder is currently sitting in the background of your mind?
Is there a piece of advice you completely dismissed a decade ago that is
Right.
suddenly starting to make terrifying sense?
Have you grown into it yet, or are you currently in the uncomfortable process of learning it the hard way?
Think about the spatial metaphors we explored today. Take a word like perspective. Are you actively trying to step back to see the wider angle of how your actions ripple out to the shopkeepers of the world?
Or are you still being humbled by the glitter? I challenge you to actively look for these mechanics playing out in your routine this week.
Look for the opportunity to put a stitch in time before an argument with a friend grows teeth.
Absolutely.
And, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on everything we've uncovered today.
Let's hear it.
If we accept the reality that we couldn't possibly understand our elders' wisdom until we lived through the friction ourselves, what does that mean for the advice you are currently trying to give to the younger people in your life?
Oh, wow. That completely reframes how I'm going to look at my kids at dinner tonight.
Exactly. When they roll their eyes at your advice, it isn't a sign that your communication has failed. Maybe your words are simply seeds planted in the dead of winter, quietly waiting for their future selves to thaw out enough to finally let them grow.
Just like walking into a room and handing someone a perfectly brewed cup of tea. You do the work, you take on the responsibility of the process, knowing that eventually they will realize it was exactly the comfort they needed all along.